The sound reached me first before I even touched the door, the hollow drip of water hitting porcelain in the silence of the night. When I pushed the bathroom door open, my breath locked in my chest. Sophia was on the tile floor, her back against the tub, her knees pulled up as if she could disappear inside herself. Her face was blotched with red, her hair matted across her damp cheeks, and beside her the kitchen knife lay gleaming under the yellow light of the single bulb. Her hands shook so violently that I feared the blade might rise on its own and finish what had been whispered into her mind. I whispered her name, Sophia, and she lifted her head slowly, as if every movement cost her the little strength she had left. Helena. She said my name was not even a sound, but a broken breath. They said I am worthless. They said I ruin everything. Maybe it is better if I disappear. The words sliced sharper than any knife. I dropped to my knees, the cold of the tile burning through my jeans. I slid the blade away across the floor. She did not fight me. Her eyes only followed it with a look that was half relief, half longing. I took her wrists in my hands and felt how icy they were trembling, like wires stretched too tight. Sophia, you are not nothing, I told her, but my own voice cracked. She shook her head, tears streaking her skin. Mother said I am a burden. Clara called me pathetic. Victor laughed at me. She hiccuped on her sobs. They do not want me here. My throat clenched because I knew she was right. I had heard the same poison from their mouths, but seeing it now etched into her breaking body was unbearable. I pulled her against me, her sobs trembling through my bones. The room reeked faintly of bleach and lavender soap, but beneath it I could smell fear sharp and metallic. The mirror above the sink caught our reflection, two women pressed together, one nearly gone, the other refusing to let her slip away. I pressed my foreheads to hers and said, "Then let them choke on their lies, because I will not let you go." She collapsed against me, sobbing like a child once again, and all I could do was hold her as tightly as I could. My mind screamed to rage at the walls, at the family, at the silence that had starved her until she was ready to vanish. But rage would not save her, so I stayed quiet and steady. Memories cut through me of that dinner when no one looked at her, when every compliment was saved for Clara, while Sophia sank deeper into shadow. Invisible then and almost erased now. I pulled her to her feet, her legs buckling beneath her, and led her toward the hallway, leaving the knife behind on the tiles where it caught the light like a warning. My heart thundered in my chest as I whispered to her, "You are not alone. I will not let them erase you." I thought that was the end of the night's terror, but as I turned my head, I caught it out of the corner of my eye. A shadow just beyond the hallway wall, a presence that shifted too quickly to be chance. Someone had been standing there watching. My skin went cold as ice. In that instant, I understood the knife had not been the only danger. We were not alone, and whatever had broken Sophia was not finished with us yet. From the outside, anyone passing by our family house that weekend would have sworn it was a picture of harmony. The old white siding gleamed with fresh paint, the lawn was trimmed neatly, and strings of fairy lights blinked in the windows like something from a magazine spread. Inside, the air was thick with perfume, roast chicken lemon polish, and the hum of conversation. It was my mother Marianne's 55th birthday, and she had made sure every surface, every plate, and every laugh looked perfectly staged. I stood in the kitchen sweating as I arranged deviled eggs for the third time, my hands cramping from overwork. Guests were arriving by the dozen polished shoes tapping across the floor, coats being hung, wine bottles uncorked. I was not seen as a daughter here, not even as a hostess. I was simply the help, a shadow moving between platters and trays, keeping the machine running so others could shine. At the center of that brightness was Clara, my brother Victor's wife. She had mastered the glossy smile that never reached her eyes, the kind of smile that bent people toward her like she was a flame and they were moths. She perched at the wine bar, laughing about a charity luncheon, pouring glasses with careful elegance. Beside her, Victor nodded politely, shoulders squared the perfect son who made no waves. Marianne sat enthroned in her favorite chair, a glass of Riesling in hand, basking in the glow of her own celebration. People adored her for her composure, her sense of class. They never saw the coldness beneath. Sophia hovered near the hallway, dressed simply, almost blending into the wallpaper, and each time someone glanced her way, she ducked her head as though apologizing for existing. I wanted to pull her close, but I knew how Marianne's eyes would narrow if I disrupted the performance. When a neighbor woman in a cashmere cardigan paused in the doorway and asked Clara brightly, "Oh, is she new?" Clara's laugh chimed like a bell. "Oh, no, that is just Elena," she said lightly, and Marianne, without lifting her gaze from her glass, added, "She has always been helpful." Helpful! The word thudded in my chest like a stone. I was not new, not a servant, I was her daughter. But to the guests, I was no more present than the hum of the refrigerator. I carried on serving as if nothing had been said because to react would have been dangerous. When the time came for cake, Clara swept into the kitchen to retrieve it. My lemon chiffon with lavender buttercream sat on the silver stand decorated with candied citrus slices I had crystallized myself. She brought it out as if she had pulled off a miracle. "Oh, this is divine," someone exclaimed when the first slice was served. "It is from Clara," Marianne declared, proudly beaming. "She is so talented, always thinking ahead." My hand froze around the spatula. The words scraped across me like glass. Later, in the quiet of the kitchen, I reached for the trash bin and found the card I had written the night before. My name scratched out, replaced neatly with Clara's handwriting. It was not forgetfulness. It was deliberate theft. I stood staring at that card, its torn edge digging into my palm, and in that moment, the celebration outside felt like a stage play in which I was a nameless extra. The room buzzed faintly with the drone of voices from the living room. Guests laughed about council scandals and college admissions, none of them aware of the small murder of identity happening in the kitchen. I felt the dull ache in my chest, but swallowed it. For Sophia, it was worse. I had watched her earlier when Marianne brushed her aside, telling a guest that Sophia never lived up to expectations. My sister had smiled faintly and excused herself as if she agreed with the insult. She had become invisible not only to the world, but to herself. Sitting at the dinner table later, I felt the draft from the cracked window chill my skin while laughter rang hollow around me. My fork scraped at dry salmon, and no one asked if I was hungry. Sophia barely touched her plate. Clara chatted about her article in a lifestyle magazine. Marianne beamed at her. Victor discussed mortgage rates with a neighbor. The scene was perfect for outsiders, polished and bright, but beneath it ran the quiet truth. This family's image thrived only by erasing us. That night, with the taste of bitterness and lemon on my tongue, I knew the cracks in the facade were not harmless. They were deliberate wounds, and both Sophia and I were bleeding behind the curtain of a perfect family. The morning after the party, I woke early to clean up what was left behind. Crumpled napkins, half-empty wine glasses, bits of frosting hardened on plates, and in the trash can, the card with my handwriting torn and replaced still stared at me like an accusation. I kept it in my pocket because some part of me wanted proof that I was not imagining the theft. Sophia drifted into the kitchen quietly, her sleeves pulled down to cover her hands, her eyes darting nervously as if she feared being caught even while doing nothing wrong. She whispered that she had overheard Clara laughing with Marianne late at night, saying that no one would ever believe Sophia if she complained about anything because she was too sensitive. I clenched my jaw, but before I could answer, Marianne entered in her silk robe, her expression cool and alert. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked. I told her about the cake, about the card, about Clara taking credit. Marianne raised her eyebrows as if I had just told her the weather was slightly humid. "Stop being dramatic, Elena," she said. "Clara is more responsible, unlike you. She thinks ahead. She helps me. You should be grateful she takes initiative." My voice caught, but I pressed again, insisting that the cake had been mine. Marianne waved her hand. "Do not exaggerate. You always twist things to make yourself look slighted. It is tiring." Victor appeared behind her, buttoning his shirt, overhearing enough to add, "You always overreact, Elena. Everything turns into an insult with you." Clara appeared in the doorway, smiling faintly, sipping coffee, and said nothing. The weight of their dismissal pressed down on me. Sophia shrank into herself even more, tugging at her sleeves. She was not being accused directly, but the way she avoided eye contact told me she was absorbing the message too. Her existence was a mistake, her feelings were weaknesses. Later that day, when I tried to talk with Sophia privately, she whispered that she felt like she was losing herself. Every time she tried to speak, Marianne silenced her. Every time she tried to contribute, Clara laughed. When she asked Victor for support, he rolled his eyes. And when she finally broke down in tears, Marianne told her to stop acting like a child. The word child repeated in Sophia's mind until she believed she was nothing more than a burden. I saw it in her posture, in the way her shoulders curled inward. I tried to remind her of the afternoons we used to spend in the park reading the sketches she used to draw the laughter she had before moving back into this house. She shook her head and whispered, "I do not remember that girl anymore." When Marianne later called me into the sitting room, she folded her newspaper carefully and said, Elena, you need to stop poisoning your sister's mind. She is fragile. She cannot handle your dramatics. If she breaks, it will be because of you." The chill in her tone left me silent. She had turned my attempt to protect Sophia into an accusation, gaslighting in its purest form. The walls of the house seemed to hum with it. At dinner that night, when Sophia tried to pass the potatoes, Clara said sharply, "Careful, you will spill them like last time," and Marianne chuckled. Victor smirked. Sophia set the dish down and her hands shook. I wanted to defend her, but Marianne's eyes pinned me in place. A single word from her could make me seem hysterical in front of everyone. So I bit down on my tongue and chewed the tasteless salmon again. The room looked warm to strangers, the chandelier light glowing on polished china, but in truth, it was a theater of erasure. The family's script demanded that Sophia and I play the roles of weak, clumsy, unstable, dramatic. The more we protested, the more those labels stuck. That night in my room, I held the torn card in my palm until the edge cut into my skin. I whispered to myself, "This was real. I know what I made. I know who I am." Yet in the silence of the house, their voices grew louder than my own. Gaslighting is not just lies spoken aloud, it is repetition until the victim doubts her own heartbeat. I feared Sophia was slipping into that darkness faster than I could reach her, and I feared that soon I might follow. The following week unfolded like a cruel rehearsal in which every scene was designed to bruise one of us. It began with something that could have been brushed off as clumsy chance. I was carrying a tray of glasses across the kitchen floor when my right foot slid forward as though the tile had turned to ice. The tray tipped, crystal clattered, and my knee struck the floor with a force that sent pain shooting through my leg. As I pushed myself up, my palms met a slick sheen across the tile. It was oil, not water, not soap. Clara stood at the counter arranging fruit slices. She turned casually and said, "Oh, Elena, you really need to watch your step. Accidents happen." She did not ask if I was hurt. She did not help me up. She simply smirked when Victor came in and laughed at the sight of me rubbing my bruised knee. Mother walked in seconds later, and instead of concern, she sighed. "Clean it up, Elena. Guests could have slipped." I wanted to shout that someone had poured it deliberately, but the words stuck like thorns in my throat. Sophia helped me mop the floor, her hands trembling so badly she spilled the bucket twice. That evening, I found her sitting on the edge of her bed, biting her nails until they bled. She whispered, "I am scared of being next." 2 days later in this kitchen, Clara offered to show Sophia how to slice vegetables more quickly. I was nearby washing dishes, listening carefully. Clara guided Sophia's hand on the knife, too firmly pressing down, as if controlling the motion. The blade nicked across Sophia's finger, drawing a thin line of blood. Sophia gasped, jerking back, but Clara only tilted her head and said gently, "See, you need to hold it properly. You are too nervous." Marianne entered just as Sophia held a paper towel to her bleeding hand. Instead of alarm, she said sharply, "Stop being so clumsy. No wonder no one trusts you with anything." Victor rolled his eyes and muttered that she should stay out of the kitchen if she could not handle a simple knife. The shame in Sophia's face broke something in me. I wanted to confront Clara outright, but Marianne's eyes warned me into silence. That night, as I treated Sophia's cut in secret, I saw how her hands still shook. She whispered, "Do you think maybe they are right about me?" I answered fiercely, "No, they are trying to make you believe it." But the doubt had already wrapped around her like chains. Another staged accident arrived during laundry day. Sophia was carrying a basket down the basement stairs when the railing came loose in her grip. She tumbled down several steps, landing hard on her shoulder. I rushed to her side, panic flooding me, but Clara appeared at the top of the stairs holding a screwdriver. "Oh, I was just tightening it earlier," she said lightly. Maybe I did not secure it. Sophia moaned in pain, and Mother shouted from upstairs, "Stop making a scene." Victor carried the basket as if that was the real problem. I helped Sophia to her room, cradling her shoulder while she bit her lip to keep from crying out loud. In the quiet, she whispered, "I feel like the house wants me gone." I knew then that it was not the house. It was Clara, and it was sanctioned by Marianne's silence. The escalation did not stop. During dinner a few nights later, Clara set a glass of red wine in front of Sophia. When my sister reached for it, the stem snapped in her hand. The glass cut into her palm, crimson soaking her napkin. Clara gasped dramatically. "Oh, how fragile!" Marianne scolded Sophia for being careless. Victor chuckled and said she could not even hold a glass. I grabbed Sophia's hand and pressed it in a towel while fury thundered in my chest. The cut was not deep, but the humiliation was sharp as a blade. The laughter of my family was louder than her cry. Each incident wore her thinner. She moved through the house like a ghost, shoulders hunched, sleeves hiding fresh bandages. At night, I heard her crying, muffled into her pillow. I wanted to shake the walls until the truth spilled out, but fear pinned me down. The power in that house belonged to Marianne's voice and Clara's manipulations. They choreographed accidents with precision, and every denial afterward made Sophia doubt her own memory. Even I felt the edges of doubt pressing in. But the card from the cake still sat in my drawer, a reminder that they lied deliberately. That card was my anchor. The final straw came one evening when I returned from a walk to clear my head. I heard Sophia in the garden crying softly. I found her crouched near the roses, her hand bleeding from fresh thorns. The shears lay beside her open. Clara appeared on the porch holding a fresh bouquet, smiling sweetly. She looked down at Sophia and said, "Maybe gardening is too much responsibility for you. Better leave it to those who can handle it." My sister's shoulders caved inward and she whispered, "I cannot do anything right." The sun was setting behind us, casting long shadows over the yard, and in that dim light, I felt the truth like a knife. These were not accidents. They were rehearsed attacks meant to destroy Sophia piece by piece. That night, I sat awake in my room, listening to the silence of the house. Every creak felt staged, every shadow deliberate. I replayed each incident in my mind, the oil on the floor, the knife pressed into her hand, the railing loosened the wineglass breaking the roses arranged while she bled. The pattern was undeniable. I realized with a chilling certainty that if I did not intervene, Sophia would vanish. Maybe not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow erosion of her will until she finally believed she deserved to disappear. My fists clenched around the torn card, still hidden in my pocket. I whispered into the dark, "I will not let you erase her." I did not know how, but I knew I had to find a way to fight back. And as I whispered those words, a faint sound stirred in the hallway outside my room, like footsteps retreating into silence. Someone had been listening. The night of the breaking point arrived without warning, though in truth it had been building for weeks. I had gone to bed restless, unable to still the storm inside me. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin until it feels unbearable. My mind churned through images of Sophia's trembling hands, her wounded palms, the fresh bruises blooming across her arms like cruel flowers. I told myself she was sleeping, that tomorrow I would find some way to get us out, but when I heard the muffled sob drifting through the hallway, my body moved before my mind could think. The sob carried me to the bathroom door, where the faint, yellow light spilled across the floor. My heart hammered as I pushed the door open. She was there. Sophia sat on the cold tile, her back pressed against the tub. Her knees were drawn to her chest, and her face was hidden behind her hair strands clinging to damp cheeks. In her lap lay a knife, the same knife Clara had used days earlier to guide her hand, the same blade that had drawn blood. Her arms trembled uncontrollably. Her breath came in shudders as though her chest could not decide if it wanted to keep living. For one endless second, I froze. My sister looked like a child cornered in her own home. Sophia lifted her eyes to mine, and in them was not just fear, but a surrender that shook me to the core. She whispered, "Elena, I cannot take it anymore. They say I am pathetic. They say I ruin everything, and maybe they are right." Her voice cracked on the last word. She raised the knife slightly as if testing the weight of giving up. "No." The word tore out of me. I lunged forward, sliding the knife away across the floor. My knees slammed the tile, but I did not feel the pain. I gripped her cold wrists. "Sophia, you are not pathetic. You are my sister. You are everything they are afraid of. They want you broken so they can keep control." She shook her head violently, tears spilling. "But Mother said I was her burden. Clara said everyone laughs at me. Victor called me useless." Her words hit like blows. I pulled her into my arms, clutching her shaking body against mine. The smell of bleach and lavender clung to the air, but beneath it was the raw, metallic scent of despair. I pressed my forehead to hers, whispering over and over, "You are not nothing. You are not nothing." She sobbed against my shoulder, the sound like a wounded animal, and I knew if I let go, she might never come back. My own tears blurred the mirror above the sink, where our reflection wavered two women clinging together against the tide of cruelty. I thought of every time Sophia had been erased at dinner tables, dismissed by our mother, ridiculed by Clara, ignored by Victor. Those moments had been rehearsals for this, each humiliation a step toward the knife. I pulled her to her feet, her body weak and trembling. We stumbled into the hallway, leaving the blade glinting on the tile like an unspoken threat. I thought we were alone, but as I steadied her weight against me, I saw a movement at the corner of my eye. A shadow shifted just beyond the hallway wall. Someone had been there, watching. My skin went cold. I tightened my hold on Sophia and whispered, "You are safe," but my own voice faltered because I knew the truth. Whoever had driven her to this moment was still near, listening, waiting. Sophia buried her face into my shoulder, whispering, "Do not leave me." I kissed the top of her head and said, "I will never leave you." Inside my chest, a vow hardened into steel. They had pushed her to the edge. They had watched for her to fall. But I would not let them erase her. Not tonight. Not ever. As I guided her back to her room, the silence of the house pressed down heavier than ever, thick with unseen eyes. I laid her gently on the bed, tucked a blanket around her shivering frame, and sat beside her until her sobs slowed. But my gaze never left the door. The shadow had retreated, yet the danger lingered. The knife was still in the bathroom, and the family that planted it in her mind still slept under the same roof. My fists clenched at the thought. Something had broken tonight, not just in Sophia, but in me. I knew the line had been crossed. There was no turning back. From here, everything would change. The morning after the bathroom, I moved through the house with the weight of stone inside me. Sophia barely rose from bed, her eyes swollen, her hands trembling whenever she reached for even the smallest object. I brewed tea, though she barely sipped it. The rest of the family carried on with their routines as if nothing had happened. Mary Ann read her paper at the dining table, her lips pursed in quiet judgment. Clara moved about the kitchen, arranging fruit slices and humming as though she were practicing for another performance. Victor scrolled his phone, grunting occasionally at news headlines. None of them asked where Sophia had been or why her eyes were red. Their silence was a verdict that what I had witnessed was not worth mention. By noon, a knock rattled the front door. I opened it to find Aunt Darlene standing on the porch, her coat still buttoned against the cool wind, her expression warm but sharp. She swept inside with the energy of someone used to claiming space. "Darling Mary Ann," she called out, her voice loud enough to carry. Mary Ann looked up from her chair, her smile tight. "Darlene, you did not say you were coming. I thought a visit might brighten your day," Darlene replied, kissing her sister's cheek before settling herself comfortably in the armchair opposite. Her eyes, however, wandered quickly across the room, settling on Sophia, who had just shuffled in, holding her sleeve close over her wrist. Sophia tried to retreat, but Darlene's voice softened. "Come here, sweetheart. Let me see you." Reluctantly, Sophia stepped closer. Darlene took her hand, and in that instant saw the faint bandage peeking out. "What happened?" she asked, concern flashing across her features. Sophia opened her mouth, but Marianne's voice cut through sharp as glass. "Just clumsy as always. She spilled something yesterday. It is nothing." Darlene's eyes flicked from Sophia's downcast face to Marianne's dismissive tone. I could see suspicion blooming there. Clara intervened with a laugh, saying, "Accidents follow Sophia like shadows." Victor chuckled under his breath. The room felt suddenly airless. Darlene did not release Sophia's hand. Her gaze settled on me steady and questioning. I wanted to scream the truth, but Marianne's glare pinned me silent. Sophia withdrew quickly, retreating to the hallway. Marianne sipped her coffee and shifted the subject to the church fundraiser, but I noticed Darlene's frown as she listened. Later that afternoon, when Clara and Marianne busied themselves with preparations for another gathering, Darlene found me in the kitchen. Her voice low, she asked Elena what is going on. I hesitated, my heart pounding, but her eyes told me she already suspected more than she was saying. I opened my mouth to answer when footsteps approached, and I snapped my jaw shut. Clara appeared holding a tray of glasses, her smile too polished. "Everything all right?" she asked. Darlene's eyes did not leave mine, but she replied brightly, "Yes, just catching up." Clara nodded and drifted away, though her glance lingered suspiciously. When she was gone, Darlene leaned closer. "You know you can tell me," she whispered. I swallowed but shook my head. "Not yet." She studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Just remember, sweetheart, silence does not heal." She left that evening, hugging Marianne and Clara tightly, but her eyes rested on me and Sophia with quiet promise. It was not a rescue not yet, but it was a crack in the wall of denial. For the first time, I felt a thread of hope that someone beyond these suffocating walls might finally see. The house seemed unchanged on the surface, but after Aunt Darlene's visit, a subtle current shifted beneath. I could see the way Clara watched me more closely, as though she sensed my loyalty drifting elsewhere. Marianne grew sharper in her remarks, making casual digs about how I was too dramatic, or how Sophia was incapable of managing herself. Victor grew more detached, answering in short grunts or smirks, but his silence gave Clara more space to dominate the air. I knew if I tried to accuse them openly, they would spin the narrative as always, turning me into the unstable daughter. But Darlene's glance had lit something inside me. If I wanted to save Sophia, I needed proof. The first step was simple observation. I began carrying a small notebook in my apron pocket, jotting down times and dates under the guise of recipe notes. Whenever Clara arranged wine glasses, I marked the hour. When Sophia's shoulder throbbed from the staircase fall, I wrote it down. When Marianne called her useless, I noted her exact words. It seemed like a fragile defense, but I felt steadier seeing the patterns emerge in ink. I could no longer gaslight myself. One evening, as I cleaned the dining room, I found the loose railing again. This time screws lay scattered in the corner, and the screwdriver was tucked behind a flower vase. I slipped the tool into my pocket and pressed the screws into an envelope marking the date. Days later, Clara handed Sophia a glass of wine at dinner again. I switched it quietly with my own, and within minutes felt a faint burn in my throat, not strong enough to incapacitate, but enough to confirm my fear. Later in the night, I poured the rest into a vial and hid it beneath my mattress. I remembered the cake card still tucked in my drawer and placed it in the envelope with the screws. Bit by bit, a collection of evidence began to form like stones for building a wall. Sophia, meanwhile, was unraveling. She cried often at night, whispering that she felt erased. Her sketchbooks lay untouched, her pencils scattered. One night, she murmured to me that sometimes she wondered if the knife would have been easier. The words jolted me into action. I held her shoulders firmly and told her I was working on something. Her eyes flicked to mine, doubtful, but a faint spark of trust glimmered there. The next morning, Clara accused me of leaving oil on the kitchen floor again. I nearly snapped, but instead I smiled calmly and said, "Oh, is that so? Perhaps the security camera above the back door caught something." Clara froze for half a second before laughing it off. The truth was, I had noticed that old camera weeks earlier, and though it was dusty, I wondered if it still recorded. That night, when everyone slept, I climbed a stool, retrieved the recorder, and discovered it was still functional. My pulse raced as I replayed the last 48 hours. There, grainy but visible, was Clara pouring liquid onto the floor just before I entered with the tray. I nearly wept with relief. I copied the file onto a flash drive I had hidden in an old jewelry box. The burden of secrecy grew heavier. Every smile I gave at dinner felt rehearsed, every polite word a mask, while my pocket held the growing arsenal of truth. I feared discovery, but each piece steadied me. I began to photograph Sophia's injuries in the dim light of my room, whispering apologies as she flinched at the flash. I assured her it was necessary. She nodded faintly, though shame flickered across her eyes. Victor remained distant, but one afternoon I overheard him arguing with Clara. He muttered that she was going too far, that people might notice. Clara's reply was sharp. Not if Elena keeps covering. Not if Mother keeps agreeing. My stomach clenched. It confirmed what I had feared. They knew exactly what they were doing and trusted the gaslighting to protect them. I considered going straight to the police, but the memory of Marianne's power in the community stopped me. She was respected at church, admired for her charity. Without evidence, they would see me as hysterical. With evidence, though, I had a chance. One late night, Sophia found me sorting through the envelope of proof. She touched the torn cake card, the screws, the vial of wine. Her voice trembled. "Do you think this will matter?" I met her gaze. "Yes. They cannot erase what is written, what is recorded." She nodded slowly, as though clutching to the idea that maybe her suffering could finally be acknowledged. It was during one of these nights that Aunt Darlene called. Her voice carried quiet urgency. "Elena, I know something is wrong. I heard the way your mother dismissed Sophia. Please tell me." My throat tightened. I almost confessed everything, but fear stopped me. Instead, I said softly, "Will you come for Sunday dinner?" She hesitated but agreed. That Sunday, I tucked the flash drive, the photos, and the envelope into my purse. At the table, Marianne gleamed in her pearls. Clara laughed over wine. Victor nodded distantly, and Sophia sat silent, staring at her plate. When Darlene arrived, her eyes swept across the room and lingered on us. I felt her question press against me. My pulse thundered, but I waited. I needed the perfect moment. And then Clara handed Sophia another glass. My sister's hand shook so violently she spilled a drop. Marianne scolded her sharply, calling her hopeless. Clara smirked. That was my breaking point. I placed my purse on the table slowly, my voice calm. "Actually, I think we should watch something together." I pulled out the flash drive. Clara's smile faltered. Darlene leaned forward, curious. Marianne's face hardened. "Not tonight, Elena," she said sharply. But my hand did not move. For once I felt the power shift. I smiled and said, "Oh, I think tonight is perfect." Sophia's eyes widened in fear, but beneath it I saw a flicker of hope. I had evidence now, and I was ready to use it. The dining room was lit warmly by the chandelier, yet the air felt brittle as glass. Marianne's voice snapped across the table. Elena put that away. Her tone held the authority of decades, the voice that had once silenced me without question. But this time my fingers did not tremble. I plugged the flash drive into the television screen that stood in the corner, one that usually played Mother's favorite news channel. The screen flickered, and then the grainy footage appeared. Clara stood in the kitchen, tilting a bottle over the tile, the slick gleam of oil spreading across the floor. Seconds later, I entered carrying the tray and slipped violently. Gasps echoed from Sophia, and even Victor leaned forward, his smirk replaced with uncertainty. Clara laughed nervously. That could be anything. But then the recording rolled on, showing her wiping her hands on a towel and hiding the bottle. I let the silence stretch. Darlene's eyes widened, her lips pressed thin. Marianne's face drained of color, but she quickly tried to recover. "This proves nothing," she declared. "Accidents happen, and Elena manipulates." I spoke firmly. "This is not an accident. It is intent." My voice sounded steadier than I felt, but the momentum carried me forward. I pulled the envelope from my purse and spread its contents across the table. The torn cake card with my handwriting, the screws from the railing, the photographs of Sophia's bruises, the vial of wine sealed tight. Marianne's hand shook as she reached for the card. She whispered, "You kept this." Yes, I answered, because you always told me my memory was wrong. The screws clinked against the wood as Darlene picked them up, her expression dark. Clara tried to interject, but I overrode her, my voice rising. Look at Sophia! Look at what has been done to her. She hides her hands because she bleeds from your games. She cries herself to sleep because you erase her existence. And you? Marianne, you let it happen. The room cracked open. Darlene stood abruptly, her voice sharp with fury. Is this true? Sophia's lips trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered yes. Clara rolled her eyes, but her mask had slipped. Victor muttered, I told you this would go too far. His admission hung in the air, damning them further. Marianne tried once more, her voice rising with desperation. Elena is twisting everything. She always wanted to make me look cruel. She is unstable. But before she could continue, Darlene cut her off. Enough. I have watched you dismiss your daughters for years, but this is criminal. I am calling the police. Marianne's face froze in shock, her authority evaporating in the face of her sister's conviction. Clara shouted, You cannot prove intent, but her voice cracked. I lifted the photos high. Proof is written on her skin. Sophia sobbed loudly, the sound raw and uncontainable. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and whispered, You are safe now. Darlene already had her phone in hand, speaking quickly into the receiver. Marianne tried to grab it, but Victor stepped between them, not to protect us, but to shield himself. He muttered, I will not go down for this, and sank back into his chair. When the officers arrived minutes later, the house erupted into chaos. Clara shouted accusations, claiming I had staged everything. Marianne wept hysterically, insisting she was only trying to guide her daughters, but the officers saw the footage, the photos, the physical evidence. One asked Sophia quietly if she felt safe here. She shook her head violently. That was enough. Clara was cuffed first, still screaming about betrayal. Marianne tried to intervene, but Darlene's testimony cut through. The officers warned her sternly and noted her complicity. Victor slumped silently, unwilling to defend them further. As they led Clara out, Sophia clutched my hand tightly, her tears mixing with relief. The neighbors had gathered outside, drawn by flashing lights. Whispers spread across the street. For once, the shame did not belong to us. It belonged to them, exposed under the night sky. Inside the house, the silence after their departure was strange, almost holy. Darlene touched my arm gently and said, You saved her. My throat thickened. I wanted to collapse from the weight of it all, but Sophia's eyes glistened with fragile hope, and that steadied me. The revenge had not been loud with screams or violence, but it was public, undeniable. The evidence spoke louder than their gaslighting ever could. And in that moment, as Sophia leaned against me, trembling but alive, I knew the tide had finally turned. The chains had cracked. Darlene stayed the night, refusing to leave us alone. We sat together in the kitchen where so many humiliations had taken place. For the first time, the air felt lighter. Sophia whispered again and again, Thank you, Elena. I held her close, whispering back, No more shadows. You are seen. The confrontation had ended with them taken away, their power shattered by their own cruelty. For the first time in years, I breathed fully. For the first time, Sophia slept without tears. And as dawn broke through the window, I promised myself that this was only the beginning. We had survived the storm. Now we would build something new on the ruins they left behind. The days after the confrontation moved like slow tides, carrying both relief and shock. The house felt different without Marianne's sharp voice or Clara's poisonous laughter. The silence that once weighed heavy now became a balm, though it carried echoes of everything that had been said. Sophia walked carefully through the halls, as if testing whether the walls themselves still held hostility. She flinched at sudden noises, but when she realized no one was behind her, the fear ebbed. For the first time in years, I saw her sit in the living room sunlight sketchbook, open her pencil, trembling but moving. That sight was worth more than any victory. Yet consequences came swiftly. The neighbors whispered, the church ladies gossiped, and reporters lingered near the driveway, eager for scandal. Marianne's arrest was a shock to the community. For decades, she had cultivated an image of generosity and grace, leading charity drives, hosting fundraisers, speaking about family values. The facade crumbled overnight. Clara's shrieking arrest footage replayed on local television, her face twisted with rage. Victor was questioned, though not charged. His silence was considered complicity, but he escaped legal punishment. Still, his reputation cracked. People muttered about how he had let everything happen under his roof. Darlene became our shield. She stood before reporters, her voice steady, declaring that her nieces deserved peace and privacy. She spoke openly at church that abuse hides in plain sight, even in families dressed in pearls and smiles. Her words carried weight because people had always trusted her honesty. Slowly, the tide of public opinion turned. Where once Sophia and I were seen as dramatic or unstable, now we were seen as survivors. The legal process was slow but visible. Clara faced charges for reckless endangerment and assault Marianne for neglect and psychological abuse, supported by testimony and evidence. At the hearings, I sat beside Sophia. She trembled whenever Clara glared, but I held her hand until the fear passed. When Marianne tried to speak in court about her devotion as a mother, the prosecutor played the footage of Clara sabotaging the staircase and presented the photos of Sophia's injuries. The torn cake card was held aloft like a symbol of years of erasure. The judge's eyes hardened. No polished words could erase the truth anymore. Outside court, strangers approached me quietly to say they believed us, that they were sorry for doubting. One elderly woman whispered that she too had been silenced by family decades earlier and wished she had found the courage sooner. I realized then that our story was not just ours. It echoed for many who had been told they were nothing. At home, Sophia began to heal slowly. Some nights she still woke crying, but instead of retreating, she reached for me. We made rituals of safety tea before bed, long walks in the park, small celebrations when she completed a drawing. Each step was fragile but real. The knife never returned to her hand. As for me, I felt the weight of years lifting those scars remained. Gaslighting had etched doubt into my bones. Even now, when I looked at the mirror, I sometimes wondered if my memory had exaggerated things. But then, I touched the envelope of evidence stored safely in a drawer and remembered. The proof was real. Our survival was real. Marianne and Clara's downfall rippled outward. Friends abandoned them. Charities revoked invitations. The community saw the polished facade for what it was. Consequences were not just legal but social, stripping them of the power they had wielded so cruelly. One evening, Darlene sat with us on the porch as the sun set. She said softly, "You girls changed the story. You refused to stay silent." Her words settled in me like a final seal. Yes, we had broken free. The past could not be erased, but the cycle had been shattered. For Sophia and for me, the future finally stretched open, like the horizon scarred yet filled with possibility. Months passed and the chaos slowly receded into memory, though its echoes never fully left. Sophia and I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, a place with peeling paint and creaky floors, but sunlight that poured through wide windows every morning. That light felt like a promise. We filled the walls with Sophia's sketches, pinned haphazardly at first, then framed with care. Each drawing marked a step forward, proof that her hands no longer shook with despair but with the urgency of creation. I watched her sit cross-legged by the window, pencil racing, and knew that life was returning to her piece by fragile piece. I enrolled in evening classes at the community college, determined to build a future not defined by the shadows of our family. The first day I walked into the classroom, I trembled. But when I saw my name written correctly on the roll sheet, I nearly cried. No one erased me here. No one rewrote my memory. The simple act of being seen as myself felt revolutionary. We built rituals of strength. Sunday dinners were no longer spectacles of control, but quiet meals shared with Darlene, who visited faithfully. She brought casseroles and laughter, filling the silence with warmth rather than criticism. Sophia baked bread, though half the loaves collapsed, and we laughed until tears ran down our faces. It was the kind of laughter that healed deep and unrestrained. The legal process concluded with sentences for Clara and Marianne. They no longer held power over us, though their shadows sometimes reached through gossip or stray remarks from neighbors. Yet even when whispers arose, we no longer bowed under them. We had truth on our side, proof carved into evidence and sealed by consequence. That armor could never be stripped away. Sophia began volunteering at an art program for children, teaching them to sketch freely without judgment. One evening, she told me quietly, "I never want anyone else to feel invisible the way I did." Her words struck deep. She was transforming pain into purpose, and I felt pride swell in my chest. For myself, I wrote essays for class about memory and truth, about how gaslighting corrodes identity, and one was published in the local paper. Readers sent letters thanking me for naming what they had endured. For the first time, my voice stretched beyond the walls of our home into the world. Still, healing was not a straight path. Some nights, Sophia woke in a sweat, whispering that she still heard Clara's laughter. Some mornings, I looked in the mirror and saw Marianne's eyes staring back, reminding me of all the times she had called me unstable. But we faced those moments together, refusing to retreat into silence. We spoke openly. We wrote. We created. In that openness, the ghosts slowly lost their grip. One evening, as the sky turned pink, I sat with Sophia on the balcony. She leaned against my shoulder and said, "Do you think we will ever be fully free?" I thought for a long moment before answering. We may never erase the scars, but freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the choice to live beyond it. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. That night, she sketched a picture of us sitting together beneath the fading sky, and she titled it, "Survivors." Our story had begun in shadows and silence and erasure. It had twisted through violence and despair, but it ended not with vengeance alone, but with resilience, with voices unbroken. We had turned gaslighting into testimony bruises, into proof, despair into art. And though the world could never give back the years stolen from us, it could not deny us this: we were no longer invisible. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Sophia's steady breathing in the next room, I felt a quiet empowerment settle in my chest. It was not the roaring triumph of courtroom victories or flashing lights of police cars. It was softer, steadier, the knowledge that tomorrow we would wake in a home of our own, making free to be who we were without fear. And that, more than anything, was victory.